G'day legends, and thank you for the opportunity to share my observations and my understanding of attritional war, and how the Russian forces are evolving tactics in Ukraine. But firstly, how do tactics evolve and how do they change over time? And it is important to remember a few lessons when we're looking at war, and I think these are best summed up in Iskander Raymond's book, Planning for Protraction, published with the International Institute of Strategic Studies. One should not necessarily assume that a competitor with little experience in one aspect of warfare is incapable, under the galvanising pressures of combat, of rapidly overcoming its earlier deficiencies. Opening phases of high-intensity conflict are critical. They are rarely determinative. Temporarily crippled opponents can recuperate. And Alex Vashinin for RUSI, he says the thought that any major power would back down in the case of an initial military defeat is wishful thinking at its best. And Russia has shown, from Napoleon to Stalin to Putin, the ability to recover from initial catastrophic failures, defeats and losses. And a lot of the tactics, strategies and diplomacy used is very foreign through Western eyes, employing, as Henry Kissinger would say, European discipline with Asian tyranny. Now, tactics evolve through your own failures, lessons, restrictions in industry, the ability and personal initiative. But they also evolve to exploit your opponent's deficiencies, and the main disparity on the battlefield is clearly manpower. Now, not only does Russia have a much larger pool to draw from, their doctrine, their equipment, command and training allows themselves to absorb, sustain and replace much larger losses. They exploit this simultaneously with command decisions. Michael Kaufman, in criticising some of Ukraine's command decisions, he says a broader problem, which is the not one step back policy, even when lacking the resources in disadvantageous terrain and near envelopment, rather than trading space for attrition or enabling commanders to conduct a mobile defence and not withdrawing out of these areas. And there is a belief that the Ukrainian command are conducting a slow, controlled, attritional, methodical withdrawal. But the battlefield from Bakhmut to Pokrovsk has not shown this. And this further exacerbates the issues that we are seeing with attrition. And then the tactic that has been developed, I refer to as the paint-by-numbers envelopment technique, because we've seen it again and again and again. It not only leverages advantages, but it also leverages on command decisions. So today on the map, and with a few slides, I'm going to show you exactly what I am talking about and discuss evolutions and what may become of this as well. And this is simply the age-old of the manoeuvre, position and attrition. Although the most recent evolution to this is, of course, the DRG, the Diversionary Reconnaissance Groups. This is to puncture porous lines, sow chaos and accumulate forces. But of course, that old manoeuvre, position, attrition gets skewed a lot and has to evolve due to the efficiency and the number of drones that we see. Now, successful operations in a protracted attritional war, they need to work in harmony with other moving elements. A series of attacks, which will include costly failed assaults, carried out simultaneously, will achieve more than a spectacular single assault that is not supported by wider theatre operations and follow-ons. Attacks must be conducted simultaneously and successively, even if the initial movements result in failures. Even if they result in success, it must be simultaneous and successive. So although I have these numbers, these do happen simultaneously and successively. Firstly, building of the flanks. Deploying enough human and machine resources to create flanks around strategically important objectives. This is exploiting manpower advantages and, of course, lengthening the front line. If you are numerically superior, lengthening the front line is in your favour. Then, once you build on that flank, you need to widen it to desaturate then opposing fire so you don't get vertically enveloped. Then using drones to hold in place. Ukrainian command, as we discussed, has shown an unwillingness to withdraw from these cauldrons. Once the flank are developed to the point where the area, for example Pokrovsk, is vertically enveloped, the focus shifts to attrition rather than kilometre squares. The aim is to control over the logistics and rotation, further leveraging Russia's manpower and fire's advantage. So I'll show you on the map very quickly what we are looking at. And of course, we have Pokrovsk here. We can see the cauldron that is getting developed. and has been developed. And a vertical envelopment isn't like a physical envelopment where, of course, we'll have this northern and southern flank actually touching. A vertical envelopment means that you have enough fires to cover all of these areas, resulting in a strategic in vertical envelopment. And this is the same risk with building these flanks. This is the same risk that could happen to Russia between, say, Razini and Kopteve. And this is why building and then fattening that to reduce that saturation is one of the very first steps on building that. But with these drones is holding troops in place. And once they're held in place, it comes to the destruction or destroy phase with traditional fires. Now, the above steps make movement far more difficult and improve your ISR. To move around under drones is very hard. But many frontline systems, as far as the drones we see used, they do lack the penetrative force to destroy hardened positions such as bunkers or basements. And the weapons that can do this are not as flexible as a drone. So once the drones hold the Ukrainian forces into more of a static posture, their positions are then targeted by Russia's overwhelming advantage in heavy artillery, such as your larger barrel artillery, but also including glide bombs. Following this and some level of destruction, there comes a point of neutralisation using TOS thermobarics. And for me, the arrival of thermobaric systems has always been a signal that ground forces and operations are imminently about to enter. The nature of thermobarics makes them devastating against semi-destroyed targets, but the risk for Russia bringing this system forward is further evidence that preceding steps have been complete and more movements are imminent. Now, we come into the next piece of chaos and accumulation. Now, simultaneously with steps 2 and 3 of hold and destroy, these DRG elements or manoeuvrable elements, these take on the costly mission of infiltrating through porous or overstretched defensive lines. But this has two effects. Now, firstly, it's chaos, distrust, and unrest. Whether one Russian DRG team or 50 actually make it into the city, once they are spotted behind positions, the psychological impact is significant. Far more significant than the few forces that are actually there. And this often increases blue-on-blue incidents and toll on the soldiers psychologically. Second, these elements use high mobility to push into position, aiming to accumulate forces and exploit it as a lever for more conventional forces. We saw this in Suja, and as well on the 12th of August on the Pokrovsk front. Then number 6 is to then exploit. You have fire control on routes, chaos inside of the objective, and mounting enemy losses. The aim is to turn attrition into territory, not territory into attrition. The closure of positions or physical envelopment, it may be less appealing than leaving a kill box open and increasing that attrition and have a byproduct of the territory. And a good example of this at the moment is on the Terni front. Of course, we see the Oskil reservoir and we see the front line from Terni near Karpivka here that Russians are working on fattening to desaturate in here. But I've often said if Russia wanted to, they would have the resource to be able to push to the Oskil at the moment and then close up this area. But instead, this is then blocked off by a reservoir and the Russian front line, leaving only one space of approximately 12 kilometres open for entry in and out. But of course, leaving this like this without fattening it does increase the amount of fires that can be then successfully targeting Russian forces in this area. Then close. Once a withdrawal occurs, which is often very costly, pulling back out, retreat can turn into rout. And this is frequently exploited across multiple lines until the front stabilises. This is what we saw in Avdiivka or Vuhledar. Advances did not stop at the next line of defence. It kept going a fair while until it stabilised. And by this retreat turning to rout, you could likely gain more kilometre squares than the city itself. Again, the kilometre squares, the territory being a byproduct of the attrition through these phases. Now, number 8, which is the unseen, is the reintroduction of mechanised manoeuvre. Now, I believe Russia's ultimate goal is to eventually reintroduce mechanised manoeuvre and Soviet-style deep manoeuvre under fire. Now, this will not be achieved through Russian tactics alone, but through Ukrainian degradation. I remain highly sceptical that mechanised manoeuvre actually can succeed even against a much smaller force in the age of drone efficiency. However, Russian industry is still heavily focused on mechanised production, which suggests to me that commanders believe that this remains a possibility. Thank you, legends, for your time. I do really appreciate you having me.